98 to 2026.
2026 NFL offseason wasn't normal. It didn't have one big moment, it had about 15 of them.
The 2026
in the 2026 NFL Draft.
Surprise trades kept happening, coaches kept getting fired, all while free agents kept flipping teams deep into the offseason when things are usually quiet. By the time everything settled, the league looked completely different than it did at the end of last season when the Seahawks hoisted the Lombardi. If you blink between the Super Bowl and now, don't worry. We're going division by division and team by team, covering every move that actually mattered, starting with the one division that showed you exactly how insane this offseason truly was in the NFC West. While everyone else was still reacting to coaching changes around the league, the Rams made a move that changed the NFL forever, trading for Myles Garrett. Sending Jared Verse, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and a 2029 third-round pick to Cleveland. Myles is a reigning Defensive Player of the Year, the first player since 1982 to record at least 12 sacks in 6 straight seasons, and the only player with 10 or more sacks in each of the past 8 years, breaking the single-season sack record this past season. He's a generational pass rusher, and now he potentially lines up next to Aaron Donald, who might be coming back, on a defense that already had a championship pedigree. But the Rams weren't done. They also traded for Trent McDuffie, sending a 2026 first, a 5th, a 6th, and a 2027 third to Kansas City. McDuffie is from Southern Cal. He played for Rams passing game coordinator Jimmy Lake at the University of Washington, and he once said the Rams were the only other team he would want to play for so his family could see every game. They then handed him a 4-year, $124 million extension, extended Matthew Stafford, signed Jalen Watson from Kansas City as well to a 3-year, $51 million deal, and re-signed Cameron Curl. The Rams have Myles Garrett, Trent McDuffie, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, and Sean McVay at the helm. That's his Super Bowl roster and coaching staff, and Les Snead made it clear he wasn't waiting around. The 49ers knew they had to answer, so they signed Mike Evans to a 3-year deal, ending his 12-year run in Tampa Bay. Evans had 11 straight seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards, which ties Jerry Rice for the longest streak in NFL history, and he ranks 10th all-time with 108 career total touchdown catches. They also signed Christian Kirk and traded a 3rd-round pick to Dallas for Osa Odigizua, and handed Trent Williams a 1-year deal worth $50 million with $37 million fully guaranteed. Dre Greenlaw is back on a 1-year, $7.5 million deal, and the only cloud still hovering over the 49ers is the Brandon Ayuk situation, who's claimed that he's won it out and has made life difficult for the front office, to say the least. The Seahawks kept Jackson Smith-Njigba on a 4-year, $168.6 million deal with $120 million guaranteed, which is top 5 receiver money ever. Rashid Shaheed got 3 years and $51 million, and Derek Hall signed a 3-year extension. But they lost Kenneth Walker to Kansas City on a 3-year deal and lost Boye Mafe to Cincinnati on another 3-year deal. The final blow came when Tariq Woolen signed with Philadelphia on a 1-year, $12 million deal. It's a lot of young talent walking out of the door in one offseason, and Seattle is betting that Smith-Njigba is worth the investment. But coming off the Super Bowl win, there's still no reason to panic. The Cardinals fired Jonathan Gannon finally after 3 years and only 15 wins. They hired Mike LaFleur, previously the Rams offensive coordinator. They've been in a holdout battle with Jacoby Brissett ever since, all while cutting ties with Kyler Murray. So there's that, I guess. But head north and the story doesn't slow down. It gets even weirder. The Bears traded DJ Moore to Buffalo, which signaled a reset at the receiver position for them. They signed Devin Bush to a 3-year, $30 million deal, brought in Garrett Bradbury from New England, and added Kobe Bryant in the secondary on a 3-year deal as well. Caleb Williams enters his 3rd year with a completely new supporting cast, so we'll have to see how he does. The Lions traded David Montgomery to Houston through Juice Scruggs, a 2026 4th-round pick and a 2027 7th-round pick. Montgomery and Joe Mixon in the same backfield is going to be a problem for defenses in Houston. Detroit extended Jack Campbell for 4 years and $81 million, with $51 million guaranteed. They signed Isaiah Pacheco on a 1-year deal for the vet men. The 2023 draft class bill is coming due soon. Brian Branch and Sam Laporta are both free agents after this season, and Jahmyr Gibbs has a 5th-year option. There's 3 foundational players from the same draft all hitting the market within a year of each other. The Lions are good, but expensive. They're going to have to make some tough decisions about who to pay and who to move on from very soon. The Packers traded Rashawn Gary to Dallas for a 2027 4th-round pick, which was a surprise move. They also traded Dontavian Wicks to Philadelphia. They signed Javon Hargrave on a 2-year, $23 million deal and extended Sean Ryan. The Packers are retooling around Jordan Love, and Lucas Van Ness is going to finally have to step up as a pass rusher. Hopefully with Micah Parsons coming back, he can do that. The Vikings threw the biggest curveball in the division, signing Kyler Murray to a 1-year deal. This is a former first overall pick in 2019 who's shown flashes of elite play, but who struggled with consistency and injuries in Arizona. They traded Jonathan Grenard to Philadelphia, signed Jawan Jennings to a one-year deal worth up to $13 million, and brought back Aaron Jones on a revised contract that lowered his base salary from $9 million to $5.5 million. Kyler Murray and Kevin O'Connell's offense with Justin Jefferson is going to be one of the most interesting experiments in the NFL this season. Every division so far has had a team that's changed everything. The NFC East might have had two. The Cowboys traded for Rashawn Gary from the Green Bay Packers for a 2027 4th-round pick. That gives them a legit pass rusher next to Quinnen Williams up in the middle of the defense. They franchise tagged George Pickens at $27.3 million, re-signed Javonte Williams for 3 years and $24 million, and extended Brandon Aubrey on a 4-year, $28 million deal. He also traded Osa Odigizua, like we mentioned before, to the 49ers for a 3rd-round pick. Brian Schottenheimer's first season seemed to be a success, but now with real expectations, we'll see what the Cowboys do. Somehow choke it, I'm sure. But the biggest coaching shock in the NFC East happened in New York. The Giants fired Brian Daboll and hired John Harbaugh. Harbaugh spent 18 seasons in Baltimore, won a Super Bowl, and made the playoffs 10 times, along with choking the most amount of times in NFL history. Now he takes over a Giants team that has been searching for stability. They traded Dexter Lawrence to Cincinnati for the 10th overall pick. Then they went shopping. They brought back Odell Beckham Jr., brought in Isaiah Likely on a 3-year, $40 million deal, signed Tremaine Edmonds for 3 years and $36 million, and added Greg Newsome on a 1-year, $8 million contract. The Giants have a new coach with championship pedigree and a completely rebuilt roster, so we'll see how they bounce back this season. But all of that was just a setup for the 2-time reigning NFC East champions. The Eagles traded A.J. Brown to New England, sending him for a 2028 1st-round pick and a 2027 5th-round pick. Brown reunites with Mike Vrabel, who he played for his first 3 seasons in Tennessee. The Eagles traded and signed for Jonathan Grenard from Minnesota to a 4-year, $100 million extension with $50 million guaranteed. Jordan Davis got a 3-year, $78 million extension as well. They signed Tariq Woolen to a 1-year deal. They also added Marquise Brown and Dontavian Wicks. Devontae Smith is now the clear number 1, with Mekhi Lemon sliding into the number 2 spot, while the Eagles have plenty of draft capital left to work with. The Commanders signed Odafe Oweh to a 4-year, $100 million deal with $68 million guaranteed. They extended Laramie Tunsil for 2 years and $60 million. They kept Diami Brown on a 1-year deal and added Chig Okonkwo at tight end for a 3-year deal. They've been rumored to be getting Brandon Ayuk for months now, but nobody honestly knows what's happening with him in that situation. Dan Quinn enters his 3rd season with Jaden Daniels and hopes to recreate his rookie season magic. Now let's get to the ugly stepchild division. The Falcons finally fired Raheem Morris and hired Kevin Stefanski, who had been with the Cleveland Browns and won Coach of the Year with them twice. The Falcons also brought back Matt Ryan back as president of football operations, which I completely forgot about. They signed Tua Tagovailoa to a 1-year deal at the veteran minimum. Tua gets a real shot to compete for the starting job after a roller coaster run in Miami that ended with a 7-10 season and a coaching change. Drake London signed a 4-year, $141 million extension with $100 million guaranteed. And Kyle Pitts got a 3-year, $54 million deal after being franchise tagged. The Falcons have a new front office, a new coach, and a quarterback competition. The Panthers signed Jalen Phillips to a 4-year, $120 million deal. Phillips is a disruptive pass rusher when healthy, and Carolina's betting that he can stay on the field. Devin Lloyd got a 3-year and $45 million deal. Jalen Coker got a 3-year, $35 million extension as well. The Panthers are building up their defense through free agency, and Bryce Young is going to have to show even more strides going into year 4 if he ever wants that contract extension. The Saints signed Travis Etienne to a 4-year, $52 million deal. They added Noah Fant at tight end and signed Caden Ellis to a 3-year, $33 million deal as well. Cameron Jordan is somehow back on a 1-year deal worth up to $11 million, and the Saints are somewhere between rebuilding and kinda contending, and nobody really knows which way they'll land. It all goes back to Tyler Shuck, I guess. The Buccaneers signed Alex Anzalone to a 2-year, $17 million deal. They extended Cade Otton for 3 years and $30 million and added Ashawn Robinson to a 1-year deal worth up to $10 million. But the biggest story is Baker Mayfield, who's still in a contract standoff with Tampa Bay at the time of this recording. The two sides aren't even close, and if Mayfield plays on his current deal, that's a distraction the Bucs don't need, especially after not winning the division last season. But now we're shifting our focus to the AFC. The Broncos traded for Jalen Waddle from Miami. They sent a 1st, 3rd, and 4th-round pick over to the Dolphins. He was a foundational piece in Miami, but the Broncos actually needed another piece alongside Courtland Sutton for Bo Nix. Now he gives Knicks a legitimate offensive weapon on the outside, someone who could take the top off of defense and open up the intermediate game. They also re-signed J.K. Dobbins on a 2-year, $20 million deal and brought back Alex Anzalone on a 2-year deal worth up to $15 million. Sean Payton got a new 5-year contract that runs through 2030, so the Broncos are locked in on their coach and their new quarterback. Waddle changes the entire geometry of that offense. The Chiefs did trade Trent McDuffie to the Rams like we mentioned before, and Patrick Mahomes posted the word "damn" on his social media when the news broke, which tells you everything about how much he was beloved in that locker room. Kansas City got a 1st, 5th, 6th, and 2027 third rounder in return. They signed Kenneth Walker, like we mentioned before, to a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million. Travis Kelce got a 3-year, $54 million extension. Justin Fields came over from the Jets, and L'Jarius Sneed is back on a 1-year contract. The Chiefs lost Trent McDuffie, and that definitely hurts, but they still have Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce, along with Chris Jones, so they'll probably figure it out. But no team in the AFC West had a better offseason than the Las Vegas Raiders. They fired Pete Carroll after just 1 season. They hired Clint Kubiak from the Seattle Seahawks. Max Crosby is still a Raider because the Baltimore trade fell apart. The Ravens had medical concerns about his knee, specifically a torn meniscus he had surgery on in January, and they backed out of the deal. So Crosby stayed in Las Vegas, and the Raiders built around him. They traded Geno Smith to the Jets for a 6th-round pick and signed Kirk Cousins to a 1-year, $20 million deal with a 2-year, $80 million option. They then signed Tyler Linderbaum to become the highest-paid center ever in NFL history for a 3-year, $81 million deal. Traded for Teron Johnson from the Bills and added Kwity Paye, Nakobe Dean, and Quay Walker on defense. The Raiders drafted Fernando Mendoza 1st overall with Kirk Cousins as a bridge, so there's real hope for the future for the first time in a long time. The Chargers kept their core together. Derwin James signed a 3-year, $75 million extension with $57 million guaranteed. Khalil Mack is back on a 1-year, $18 million deal. They did snag Mike McDaniel, though, as their OC after being fired from the Miami Dolphins, and added David Njoku at tight end, Keaton Mitchell at running back, and Dalvin Tomlinson on defense. The Chargers didn't make a splash, but they retained their stars, and with Jim Harbaugh entering year 3 and Justin Herbert entering like year 18, the expectation is a deep playoff run, at least 1 win, finally. But now we're headed up north, to the AFC North, where John Harbaugh is no longer. John Harbaugh finally got canned from the Baltimore Ravens, and I think that was one of the best days that I've had all year. They hired Jesse Minter, who had been the Chargers defensive coordinator and previously worked in Baltimore under Harbaugh. The Max Crosby saga dominated the early headlines. For about 48 hours, everyone thought Crosby was a Raven. The trade was agreed to, but the Ravens had independent doctors review his knee and decided the long-term durability was too risky. They rescinded the deal and Crosby stayed in Las Vegas. Baltimore pivoted fast. They signed Trey Hendrickson to a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million guaranteed. Hendrickson led the NFL with 17.5 sacks in 2024 and ranked 2nd in overall pressure rate since 2021. He's one of the best edge rushers in football, and now he plays for a different team in the AFC North. The Ravens also lost Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders, lost Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar, and watched 9 free agents signed elsewhere in the first 2 days. John Simpson came in on a 3-year, $30 million deal, and Calais Campbell is back on a 1-year contract. The Ravens now have a new coach, new edge rusher, new offensive line questions, and a completely different identity. But they also have Lamar, so they'll be solid if they're healthy. The Bengals looked at all this chaos and decided to load up. They traded for Dexter Lawrence, sending the 10th overall pick to the Giants. Then they extended Lawrence for a 1-year and $28 million deal. They signed Jonathan Allen to a 2-year, $26 million deal and Boye Mafe from Seattle on a 3-year, $60 million contract. They extended Orlando Brown Jr. for 2 years and re-signed Brian Cook for 3 years. The Bengals' defense got significantly better, and Joe Burrow now has a real front 7 to work with. The Browns fired Kevin Stefanski and hired Todd Monken, who had been the Ravens' offensive coordinator and helped build one of the most efficient offenses in football. But Cleveland's franchise leader in sacks is now a Los Angeles Rams. Cleveland got back Jared Verse, the 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd-round pick. Verse is solid, and at 25 years old, he's already had 2 Pro Bowls and a Defensive Rookie of the Year award. But you don't replace Myles Garrett. Cleveland also signed Zion Johnson to a 3-year deal, brought in Elton Jenkins on a 2-year deal, and added Quincy Williams at linebacker. The Browns are in complete reset mode, and it's going to take some time for them to get back to where they once were, if they ever get back there at all. Mike Tomlin stepped down after 19 seasons in Pittsburgh. The Steelers hired Mike McCarthy, who had coached Dallas for several seasons and had success with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. Then the front office re-signed Aaron Rodgers to a one-year deal worth $22 million with up to $25 million in incentives. Aaron said this would be his last season before retirement, so let's hope. They also traded for Michael Pittman from the Colts and signed him to a 3-year $59 million deal. Nick Herbig got a 4-year $100 million extension with $42 million guaranteed. Cameron Hayward signed a 2-year deal worth $32 million, and Jamel Dean came over on a 3-year $36 million contract. The Steelers went from wanting a fresh start to bringing back Aaron Rodgers and bringing in Mike McCarthy to go slightly above or below 500 yet again. However, let's get to the most forgotten division in the AFC South. The Houston Texans traded for David Montgomery, like we had mentioned before, for a couple of first-round picks and Juice Scruggs. Having Montgomery and Joe Mixon in the same backfield is going to be a nightmare for defenses. They also extended Will Anderson Jr. for 3 years and $150 million with $134 million guaranteed. It's quarterback money for a DN. And Danielle Hunter got a 1-year $40 million extension as well. Azeez Al-Shire got 3 years $54 million. Dalton Schultz got a 1-year $12 million extension, and they signed Reed Blankenship for 3 years and $24 million. Brought in Trent Brown and Braden Smith to solidify the offensive line and added Wyatt Teller on a 2-year deal worth up to $23 million. The Texans are all in, and CJ Stroud has a loaded roster around him on both sides of the ball. There's no more excuses. The Colts re-signed Daniel Jones to a 2-year, $88 million deal that can reach up to $100 million with incentives, and $60 million of that is guaranteed. It's a massive bet on a quarterback coming off an Achilles and ACL injury and makes absolutely no sense, but whatever. Alec Pierce also stayed for a 4-year, $114 million. They traded Zaire Franklin to Green Bay for Colby Wooden and added Arden Key on a 2-year, $20 million deal. The Colts are betting big on Daniel Jones, and if it works, they're dangerous. The Jaguars had a quiet offseason, but they kept their own. Trayvon Walker signed a 4-year, $110 million extension, and Brenton Strange got a 3-year, $48 million deal. Monteric Brown signed for 3 years and $33 million as well. They're not making any headlines, but they're keeping the core together. The Titans fired Brian Callahan and hired Robert Saleh. Saleh brings defensive credibility and a fiery culture that Tennessee has lacked. Jeffrey Simmons signed a 3-year, $105 million extension with $100 million guaranteed, making him one of the highest paid defensive tackles in NFL history. John Franklin Myers got 3 years and $63 million. Wan'Dale Robinson signed a 4-year, $78 million deal. They traded Tavondre Sweat to the Jets for Jermaine Johnson. Cordero Flott got 3 years and $45 million. Alontae Taylor got 3 years and $60 million. The Titans have a new coach and they're spending real money. Robert Saleh wants to win right now. We're finally getting to the most chaotic and final division in the offseason. The Bills fired Sean McDermott after 9 seasons with them. That was 7 years with Josh Allen, multiple AFC Championship appearances, and 0 Super Bowls. The clock just ran out. They promoted Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator who previously rebuilt the offense after Ken Dorsey left mid-season. Brady's young, aggressive, and knows the roster inside and out. Their first big move was trading for DJ Moore from the Browns, sending a 2nd-round pick to Chicago and getting Moore along with a 5th-round pick. That gives Josh Allen a legitimate number 1 receiver who hasn't been there since Stephon Diggs. They also signed Bradley Chubb to a 3-year, $43.5 million deal, re-signed Connor McGovern to a 4-year, $52 million extension, and brought back Dawson Knox on a 3-year contract. The Bills are retooling on the fly with a new head coach to keep the window open, so we'll see if they can do that. The Dolphins fired Mike McDaniel after a 7-10 season. That's 4 years and 1 playoff appearance. They hired Jeff Hafley, previously the Packers defensive coordinator, and then traded Jalen Waddle to Denver. That one stings. Waddle was a foundational piece, but they did get a lot of picks back, so hopefully they can rebuild with that. They signed Malik Willis to a 3-year, $67.5 million deal with $45 million guaranteed and $22 million signing bonus. They also extended Devon Achane for 4 years and $68 million deal, and traded Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Jets for a 7th-round pick. While Miami was blowing it up, New England was loading up. The Patriots made the biggest wide receiver splash of the offseason. They traded for A.J. Brown from the Eagles, sending a 2028 first and a 2027 5th. Brown joins a receiving room that also added Romeo Doubs on a 4-year, $70 million deal. They signed Elijah Vera Tucker away from the Jets to a 3-year, $42 million contract. Draymond Jones came over on a 3-year, $39 million deal. But the real story is the Mike Vrabel and Diana Rossini story. Honestly, it's too much to get into here, but I think the distraction will 100% carry into the next season. I expect the Pats to regress to a mediocre playoff team. The Jets traded for Geno Smith, sending a 6th-round pick to Las Vegas. Geno is back where it all started 13 years ago. They immediately signed Minkah and extended him to a 3-year, $40 million deal. They signed Demario Davis to a 2-year, $22 million deal. They traded for Tavondre Sweat from Tennessee, sending Jermaine Johnson on his way. Joe Tippmann got a 4-year, $66 million extension, and Breece Hall got the franchise tag, then signed a 3-year, $45 million deal. They're trying to win now with a veteran roster with Geno Smith as the quarterback, so good luck with that. The 2026 season is going to be completely unpredictable, and that's exactly why I can't wait for it to start. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.